The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus. Part 1. Far away beyond the borders of the human world, where the sky touches the deepest, quietest forests, lies Burzee, the most beautiful and magical forest one can imagine. The Forest of Burzee is grand and majestic, and those who dare to step into its shade can feel its silent power. Not a single animal in the forest knows fear, for Burzee is a land where goodness reigns. The Forest of Burzee has its own inhabitants. Since ancient times, it has been home to fairies, knooks, ryls, and nymphs, immortal beings who live here in happiness and peace. The nymphs are the gentle guardians of flowers, plants, and young animals. Over all the nymphs of the Forest of Burzee rules Queen Zurline. The ryls are the little gardeners of the forest. They care for the soil and for everything that grows from it. The knooks are the guardians of the animals. They understand the language of creatures and know how to calm them or call them when needed. They make sure that order and balance reign in the forest, so that every animal has its place and nothing is ever lacking. Together, the nymphs, ryls, and knooks create a forest where no one needs to be afraid. The oldest and the wisest being in the Forest of Burzee is the Great Aak. Though his face is serious, deep within his eyes shines kindness. With a single movement of his hand, he can calm the animals, still the wind, or dry away a storm. Nature itself obeys him out of respect and love. The Great Aak stands at the head of the Council of the Immortals, which decides all matters of importance, who belongs in Burzee, what is allowed and what is forbidden, and how to protect the balance of nature. All the beings of the forest, nymphs, knooks, and ryls alike, respect him and hold him in great esteem. Although Aak is very powerful, he has one weakness. He loves the innocence and goodness carried within the hearts of children. One night, the nymphs sat at the feet of the Great Aak, listening to his wise words as he spoke. "We live happily, my dear ones, in our forest," said Aak, gently stroking his beard. "But we know nothing of the sorrow and hardship of those mortals who dwell in the world beyond our woods. Often, when I pass by someone who is suffering, I wish to help and take away their sorrow. But suffering is a natural part of the lives of mortals, and it is not our role to interfere with the laws of nature. On my travels, I have many times stopped to help children, as mortals call these little beings, and save them from suffering. I cannot interfere in the fates of grown mortals. They must bear their burden that nature has given them. But helpless babies, innocent children of humankind, have the right to be happy until they are grown and able to face the trials of life. Therefore, I feel it is right to help them." And on this very night, Aak continued, "As I was approaching the edge of Burzee, I heard a faint cry. It was a baby. I looked around, and near the forest I found a helpless child, lying on the grass and crying. Nearby, hidden among the trees, the lioness Shiegra was lurking. "What did you do, Aak?" the queen asked anxiously. "Not much, for I was in a hurry to return to the nymphs, but I ordered Shiegra to remain with the child and to tell all the animals and serpents of the forest that no one must harm the baby." "I'm glad you did so," the kind queen said again, this time with relief. But the heart of Necile, one of the nymphs, was filled with a strange resolve, and she quietly slipped away from the group. She moved swiftly along the forest path until she reached the edge of the mighty Forest of Burzee and stopped to curiously observe her surroundings. Never before had she ventured so far, for the law of the forest commanded the nymphs to remain deep within the woods. Necile knew she was breaking the law, yet she went on. She resolved to see with her own eyes the baby of whom Aak had spoken, for she had never before seen a human child. All immortals are grown. Children do not exist among them. When she looked through the trees, she saw the child lying on the grass. It was now sleeping sweetly, nestled close to Shiegra. The baby was still far too young to know danger. It felt only safety and comfort. Necile quietly approached the baby and knelt on the soft grass. Her pink cloak spread around her like a delicate little cloud. Her face reflected curiosity, surprise, and above all, a tender motherly feeling. The baby was so tiny and helpless. When Necile looked at it, the child opened its eyes, smiled at her, and reached out with its little hands. Necile lifted the baby into her arms and hurried along the forest path, carrying it back to the Great Aak. Aak frowned when Necile stood before him, holding the baby tightly in her arms. From her eyes shone fearless courage. For a moment all the nymphs stood stunned and amazed. But Aak's brow slowly softened as he watched the beautiful immortal Necile, who had so bravely broken the law of the forest. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Aak gently placed his hand upon her hair and kissed her forehead. "For the first time since I have known this forest," he said softly, "a nymph has disobeyed me and my laws. And yet, in my heart, I find no word of reproach. What do you wish, Necile?" "Please, let me keep the child," the nymph replied, beginning to tremble as she fell to her knees in supplication. "Here, in the Forest of Burzee, where humans have never set foot?" Aak asked. "Yes, here, in the Forest of Burzee," Necile answered bravely. "Allow me to care for the baby. Look how weak and helpless it is. Surely it cannot harm Burzee or the master of the forest." "But the law, child, the law!" Aak cried sternly. "You make the law, master of the forest," Necile replied. "If you yourself save the child from death, who in the world could forbid me to care for it?" Queen Zurline, who had been listening attentively all the while, clapped her hands with delight and laughed at the nymph's answer. "You have trapped yourself, Aak," she exclaimed with a smile. "Now, please, hear Necile's request." The master of the forest, as he always did when he was deep in thought, slowly stroked his silver beard. Then he said, "The child may remain, and I shall grant it my protection. But I warn you all, since this is the first time I have relaxed the law, it shall also be the last. Never again, until the end of the world, shall a mortal be adopted by an immortal. Otherwise, we would sacrifice our happy lives to worry and sorrow. Good night, my nymphs." And so Aak departed, and Necile hurried back to her dwelling to rejoice in her new and precious treasure, the baby who had changed her life. The very next day, Necile's home became the most beloved place in the entire forest. The nymphs gathered around her and the baby, who slept peacefully in her arms. They all praised Great Aak's kindness for allowing Necile to keep the child and care for him. Even the queen came to gaze upon the innocent little face and hold a tiny hand in her beautiful palm. "What shall we call him, Necile?" the queen asked with a smile. "Let his name be Claus," Necile replied, "for it means little." The nymphs clapped with joy. They did not yet know that this child would one day change the world, that one day he would bring joy into the homes of all children, that one day his name would be whispered in every corner of the earth. What awaits him in the Forest of Burzee? I will tell you in the next part of the tale of the life and adventures of Santa Claus. Until then, your Panda Millie says goodbye to you.